June 7th, 1981, county auction outside Hampton, Iowa. Hot Saturday afternoon, 100 degrees, humid, miserable. Tom Peterson stood in the crowd watching farm equipment sell. Small crowd. Economy was good. Nobody needed cheap equipment. Everyone was buying new. The auctioneer pointed to an old tractor sitting in the back. 1948 Farmall H, faded red paint. Rust everywhere. One tire flat. Exhaust stack bent. Looked like junk. Next lot. 48 Farmall H. Runs, needs work. Let's start at 500. Silence, nobody moved. All right, 250. More silence. $100 to get us started. Tom raised his hand. 75. The auctioneer laughed. 75? That's insulting. This tractor's worth scrap value alone. 75 is what I got. Nobody else bid. Auctioneer shrugged. Sold for $75 to the gentleman who knows a bargain when he sees one. Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Tom didn't care. He had a tractor for $75. Tom's neighbor watched from across the lot. Richard Morrison, richest farmer in the county, 3,000 acres. All the newest equipment. Big house, new trucks every 2 years. Richard walked over to Tom, smiled. You bought that piece of junk for $75? Yep. Tom, that thing's worthless. Probably costs more to fix than it's worth. Why waste your money? Because I don't have money to waste on new equipment. $75 I can afford, $200,000 for a new tractor I can't. Richard laughed. That's why I'm farming 3,000 acres and you're farming 300. You think small, I think big. You buy junk, I buy quality. In 10 years I'll have 10,000 acres. You'll still be puttering around on that rust bucket. Tom shrugged. Maybe, but I'll own my rust bucket. You'll owe the bank for your quality. Debt is leverage, Tom. You'll never understand that. Stay poor if you want. I'm building an empire. Richard walked away, left Tom standing next to the 48 Farmall. Tom looked at the tractor. It was junk. Richard was right about that. But it was Tom's junk. Paid for. No debt. Tom towed the Farmall home behind his old truck, parked it in his shed, spent that evening evaluating it. Engine seized, transmission locked, hydraulics dead, tires rotted, sheet metal rusted through in places. Everything Richard said was true. The tractor was junk. But Tom had time, had skills, had determination. Spent the next 3 months rebuilding that Farmall, freed the engine, replaced pistons and rings, new gaskets, got it running, freed the transmission, replaced worn gears, got it shifting, rebuilt hydraulics, new pump, new lines, got them working, patched sheet metal with scrap, not pretty but functional. Found used tires at salvage yard, $40 for a set, total invested, 75 purchase plus 212 in parts. 287 total. By September 81, the Farmall ran. Not pretty, but reliable. Tom used it for everything, ploughing, disking, pulling wagons. The tractor worked. Richard saw Tom working with the Farmall. Drove over. You actually got that thing running? Yep, runs good. How much did you spend fixing it? About 200 in parts, plus my labor. Richard laughed. You spent 3 months of labor to save a junk tractor. Tom, your time is worth money. You could have been doing something productive. I was being productive. I now have a working tractor for under $300. What would a new tractor cost? Mine cost $180,000, but it's got air conditioning, radio, power shift, comfort, efficiency. Yours is a tin can with wheels. My tin can has no payment. Your comfort has a $3,000 monthly payment. I'll take the tin can. Richard shook his head. You'll never get ahead with that attitude. Think bigger, Tom. Tom watched Richard drive away in his brand new diesel pickup. $70,000 truck. Tom drove a 1973 Ford, paid $800 for it. Still ran. 1982 brought good crop prices. Richard expanded aggressively, bought another 1,000 acres, borrowed to buy more equipment, was up to 4,000 acres. Tom farmed his 300 carefully, made decent money, saved it, didn't expand. Richard mocked him. Crop prices are high. Land values are up. This is the time to grow. You're wasting opportunity sitting on 300 acres. I'm comfortable at 300. Comfortable means stagnant. I'm at 4,000 and going to 6. That's growth. 1983 arrived. Farm crisis started. Export markets collapsed. Crop prices fell. Interest rates soared. Suddenly, Richard's aggressive expansion looked different. Richard had borrowed $6 million at 21% interest. Annual debt service, $1,260,000. His 4,000 acres couldn't generate that much cash, not at 1983 prices. Richard tried to refinance. Banks said no, tried to sell land to reduce debt. No buyers. Everyone was trying to sell. Tom watched from his 300 acres. He had no debt. His operating costs were low because he owned his equipment. Even at depressed prices, he could survive. The farm kept working. 35 years old. Still running, Tom maintained it carefully. Oil changes, grease, adjustments, the tractor never quit. Richard came over in March '84, looked different, stressed, aged. "Tom, I need to talk to you about something." "What's up?" "I'm in trouble. Deep trouble. The bank wants $200,000 to keep from foreclosing. I don't have it. I need to sell some equipment. Would you be interested in buying anything?" Tom looked at his neighbor. The man who'd mocked him for buying a $75 tractor, now desperate to sell equipment to save his farm. "What are you selling?" "I've got 3 tractors I could let go. The 50/50, the 40/40, the 30/30, all newer, all good equipment. I paid $540,000 for all 3. I'll sell them to you for $200,000. That's a steal." "Richard, I don't have $200,000. I don't even have $20,000. You must have something saved." "You never spend money. I have $18,000 saved. That's my emergency fund. I'm not touching it." "Tom, these tractors are worth $540. I'm offering them for $200. That's $140 per tractor. You'll never find a deal like this." "I don't need 3 tractors. I've got the Farmall. It works." Richard's face fell. "You're going to stick with that rust bucket while I'm offering you modern equipment at 1/3 of value?" "Richard, I can't afford your equipment even at 1/3 of value, and I don't need it. The Farmall does everything I need." "That 48 Farmall? Tom, that tractor is obsolete. Obsolete but paid for. Your tractors are modern but financed. I'll take paid for over modern any day." Richard left angry, desperate. 3 months later, the bank foreclosed. Richard lost everything. 4,000 acres, all the equipment, the big house, everything. Richard and his family moved to town. He got a job managing a grain elevator, making $32,000 a year after farming 4,000 acres. Tom kept farming his 300 acres with the 48 Farmall, the tractor everyone laughed at, the $75 junk heap, still working. 1985 through '89 were brutal years for Iowa agriculture. Hundreds of farms foreclosed. Tom survived. Not because he was smarter, because he had no debt. His operating costs were minimal. The Farmall used about a gallon of fuel per hour. Maintenance was cheap. Oil, grease, occasional parts. No payments, no interest. Just basic operating costs. Even with terrible crop prices, Tom could break even. That was enough. Breaking even meant surviving. Surviving meant keeping the farm. Richard watched from town, bitter, angry. His former farmland was bought by a corporate operation. Farmed by hired workers. Richard drove past it daily, going to his elevator job, reminder of what he'd lost. In 1990, 7 years after the crisis started, markets began recovering. Crop prices improved, land values stabilized, survivors started rebuilding. Tom was a survivor. His 300 acres were still his. The Farmall was still working. He'd made it through. Richard came to visit. First time in 6 years, looked older, defeated. "Tom, I need to tell you something. I was wrong about everything, about debt, about expansion, about your $75 tractor. You don't need to say that. I do. I mocked you for thinking small, for buying junk, for being conservative. Turns out small and conservative survives, big and aggressive fails. I lost everything because I thought your way was wrong. It wasn't wrong, it was smart." Tom didn't gloat, didn't say I told you so, just listened. "That farmall you bought for $75, it saved your farm. My 3 tractors that cost $540,000, they're the reason I lost my farm. The bank took them, sold them for pennies. All that debt, all for nothing." "Richard, you couldn't have known the crisis was coming." "Maybe not. But I could have been more careful, could have borrowed less, could have saved more, could have been more like you. But I thought I knew better, thought bigger was always better. I was wrong." Richard left. Tom never saw him again. Heard later Richard moved to Des Moines, got a job at a feed company, never farmed again. The years passed. 1991, 92, 93. The farmall kept working. Tom added a few pieces of equipment, all bought used, all paid cash, nothing financed. By 1996, 15 years after buying the farmall, Tom was still farming, still successful, still debt-free. The farmall was 48 years old. Tom had owned it 15 years. Put approximately 5,000 hours on it. The tractor showed its age but still worked. Tom's son asked him about it. "Dad, why do you keep using that old farmall? You could afford a newer tractor now." "Because it works. Because it's paid for, because it reminds me of an important lesson." "What lesson?" "That what you own matters more than what you owe." Richard had the newest equipment, owed millions, lost everything. I had a $75 tractor, owed nothing, kept everything. The farmall represents that lesson. "But it's so old, so slow, so uncomfortable." "You're right, but it's mine. No bank owns it. No lender can take it. That's worth more than comfort." Tom kept the farmall until 2004. 23 years of ownership. Finally retired it when the engine block cracked beyond repair. Total invested over 23 years, 75 purchase. 212 initial parts, approximately 800 in maintenance parts over 23 years. 1,087 total hours of use, approximately 7,500, cost per hour 14 cents. Tom bought a newer tractor in 2004, paid cash, 22,000 for a good used tractor, no financing. He kept the farmall, parked it in the shed, couldn't bring himself to scrap it. The tractor had saved his farm, deserved respect. In 2008, Tom retired, sold the farm to his son. 300 acres now worth 900,000, free and clear. No debt. Tom's son asked about the old farmall. "What should I do with it?" "Keep it. That tractor is a reminder. When times get hard, and they will, remember the farmall. Remember that simple and paid-for beats complex and financed. Remember that your grandfather survived because he thought small when everyone else thought big." The son kept the farmall, restored it cosmetically, painted it proper Harvester red, new seat, chrome exhaust stack, looked beautiful. Entered it in the Iowa State Fair Antique Tractor Show. Won ribbon. People asked about it. 48 Farmall H. My dad bought it for $75 in 1981, spent 3 months rebuilding it. Everyone laughed, said it was junk. Dad used it for 23 years. That junk tractor helped save our farm during the 80s crisis while neighbors with new equipment lost everything. The story spread. Tom became minor legend. The guy who saved his farm with a $75 tractor. Local newspaper interviewed him in 2010. Tell us about the farmall. Tom explained. 1981, I bought that tractor for $75. My neighbor Richard laughed, said I was thinking small. He was farming 3,000 acres with millions in new equipment. I was farming 300 with a 48 farmall. Crisis hit in 83. Richard's debt crushed him. Lost everything by 84. My lack of debt saved me. The farmall kept working, didn't care about economy, didn't care about interest rates, just kept running. 15 years later, 1996, I still had my farm. Richard was working in Des Moines, having lost his. The difference? I owned a $75 tractor. He owed millions on modern equipment. That farmall taught me the most important lesson of my farming career. What you own matters more than what you owe. Doesn't matter how old it is. Doesn't matter how it looks. If it's paid for and it works, it's worth more than the newest equipment that's financed. People thought I was poor because I drove old trucks and used old tractors. I wasn't poor, I was debt-free. There's a difference. Poor means you can't afford things. Debt-free means you choose not to owe. I chose debt-free. The farmall represented that choice, $75. Everyone laughed, but it worked. For 23 years. Cost me 14 cents per hour to operate. Show me a new tractor that costs 14 cents per hour. Richard's new tractors cost him his farm. My old tractor saved mine. That's the whole story right there. The newspaper article generated hundreds of responses, farmers sharing similar stories. I kept old equipment, survived the crisis. Neighbor bought new, lost everything. The lesson resonated, not because it was complex, because it was simple. Own more than you owe. Simple beats fancy. Paid for beats financed. Tom died in 2018, age 79, lived his whole life debt-free, never owed a bank a penny after paying off his original land in 1976. His funeral was attended by hundreds, former neighbors, fellow farmers, equipment dealers, people who'd learned from his example. The eulogy focused on the farmall. Tom Peterson bought a $75 tractor in 1981. His rich neighbor laughed, mocked him, said he'd never get ahead thinking small. 15 years later, Tom still had his farm. The rich neighbor had lost everything. The $75 tractor had outlasted millions in modern equipment. That's Tom's legacy, not the size of his farm. Not the value of his estate. The wisdom to understand that ownership beats debt, that simple beats complex, that laughing last beats laughing first. The rich neighbor laughed at the $75 tractor. Tom had the last laugh, still had his farm, still had his freedom, still had his dignity. We could all learn from Tom. In a world that says borrow and spend, Tom saved and owned. In a world that says bigger is better, Tom stayed manageable. In a world that says image matters, Tom focused on substance. Rest well, Tom. Your $75 tractor taught us all something important. What you own matters more than what you owe. Simple wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless. The 48 farmall sits in Tom's son's shed today, fully restored, runs perfectly, gets started once a month, driven around the farm, maintained lovingly. A plaque on the shed wall tells the story. 1948 farmall H, purchased June 7th, 1981 for $75. Rebuilt and used for 23 years, helped save this farm during the 1980s farm crisis while neighbors with modern equipment lost theirs. A reminder that what you own matters more than what you owe. Visitors tour the farm, see the farmall, hear the story. Leave understanding something important about debt, ownership, and surviving hard times. The rich neighbor laughed at the $75 junk tractor. 15 years later, he'd lost his farm and Tom still had his. The farmall wasn't junk. It was wisdom on wheels. That's the power of owning versus owing. That's the lesson of thinking small in a world that demands you think big. That's what Tom Peterson proved with $75 and a 48 farmall. The neighbor laughed. Tom survived. The farmall kept running, and 15 years later everyone knew who'd made the right choice. Own your equipment, own your land, own your life. Let others laugh. You'll have the last laugh when you still have what matters. That's the Tom Peterson way. That's the $75 tractor story. That's the lesson that lives forever. Simple beats fancy. Paid for beats financed. Laughing last beats laughing first. The rich neighbor learned too late. Tom knew all along. The farmer proved it every day for 23 years. $75. Best investment Tom ever made. Not because of the tractor, because of the lesson. Own more than you owe. Survive when others fail. Keep farming when others quit. That's what the $75 farm all taught. That's why Tom still had his farm 15 years later. That's why the story matters. The end. The rebuild, 3 months of patient work. When Tom towed the 48 Farmall home that June evening in '81, his wife Martha looked at it and sighed. "Tom, that thing is a pile of rust. Why did you waste $75 on that?" "Because I can fix it. And once it's fixed, we'll have a working tractor for under $300 total. Can't beat that." "You could have saved that $75 for something we actually need." "We need a tractor. This is a tractor. It'll work." Tom started the rebuild the next day, Sunday morning, pulled the Farmall into his shed, began evaluating every system. Week 1, engine assessment. The engine was completely seized, pistons frozen in cylinders. Tom removed the head, found pistons rusted to cylinder walls from sitting outside for years. He soaked the cylinders in penetrating oil for 3 days. Then carefully worked each piston loose with wooden blocks and careful hammering. Took 8 hours to free all 4 pistons without damaging them. Once freed, Tom pulled the engine apart completely, every piece, spread them on his workbench, evaluated each component. Pistons, worn but salvageable, needed new rings, $12 for a set. Cylinders, scored but within tolerance, honed them himself with Harbor Freight hone, $18. Crankshaft, good, just needed polishing, did it himself. Bearings, shot, needed replacing, $32 for full set. Valves, worn, ground them himself using borrowed valve grinder. Gaskets, all needed replacing, $28 for complete set. Week 2. Engine rebuild. Tom rebuilt the engine evenings after fieldwork, 3 to 4 hours nightly. By end of week 2, engine was reassembled, fresh paint on block, new gaskets throughout, proper torque on every bolt. Cost so far, $90 in engine parts. Week 3, transmission work. The transmission was locked, gears seized. Tom drained ancient oil, looked like tar, poured in penetrating oil, let it soak for days, manually worked the gear shift, back and forth, slowly freed the gears, once moving, drained the penetrating oil, filled with fresh gear oil. Transmission wasn't perfect. Ground a bit going into third, but it worked. Total cost, $12 for gear oil. Week 4, hydraulics. The hydraulic system was completely dead, pump frozen, lines cracked, cylinder leaking. Tom found a used hydraulic pump at salvage yard, $28. Installed it, made new hydraulic lines from bulk hose and fittings, $36. Rebuilt the cylinder with salvage seals, $14. Week 5, sheet metal and tires. The sheet metal was rusty, holes in several places. Tom cut patches from scrap metal, welded them over holes. Not pretty, but functional. The tires were completely dry rotted. Tom found a used set at salvage yard, $40. Mounted them himself. Week 6, final assembly. Tom reassembled everything, connected all systems, filled fluids, new oil, new coolant, fresh fuel. Week 7, first start, September 3rd, '81. Tom turned the key, engine cranked, caught, coughed, died, adjusted carburetor, tried again, cranked, caught, ran rough, smoothed out, purred. The Farmall was running, first time in probably 5 years. Tom drove it around his farmyard, tested all gears, tested hydraulics, everything worked. Total invested. Purchase $75, engine parts $90, transmission oil, $12, hydraulics $78, tires $40, MISC $7, total $302. Martha watched Tom drive the farm all, shook her head. You spent 3 months on that. Worth it. We have a working tractor for $300. New one costs $180,000. I'd say that's worth 3 months. She couldn't argue with the math. The contrast, Tom versus Richard. To understand why Tom survived and Richard failed, you need to see their complete financial pictures. Tom's operation, 1981. Land, 300 acres, owned free and clear, paid off 76. Equipment, Farmall H, $302 total. Old planter, 400. Old disc, 300. Old combine, 12,800. Old truck, 800. Total equipment value, approximately $4,600. Annual debt service, 0. Annual operating costs, approximately $24,000. Seed, chemicals, fuel, repairs. Gross income, Goodyear, approximately $78,000. Net, approximately $54,000. Living expenses, $22,000. Saved. Annually, $32,000. Tom could survive on net income as low as $24,000. Just needed to cover operating costs. Everything above that was profit or savings. Richard's operation, 1981, land, 4,000 acres, financed, owed $4.2 million at 14%, bought late 70s at peak prices. Equipment, 4 tractors, $540,000 total, 2 combines, $680,000, full implement line, $380,000, trucks, $140,000, total equipment value, $1,740,000, all financed, total debt, $5. $94 million annual debt service, approximately $832,000 interest plus principal. Annual operating costs, approximately $280,000. Gross income, Goodyear, approximately $1,040,000. Net before debt service, approximately $760,000. After debt service, negative $72,000. Richard needed to gross over $1.1 million just to break even. Any decrease in revenue was catastrophic. When crisis hit in '83, crop prices dropped 35%. Richard's gross income dropped to $676,000. After operating costs, $396,000. Debt service still $832,000. Shortfall $436,000 annually. Richard couldn't cover his debt. Banks wouldn't refinance. He was doomed. Tom's gross income dropped to $50,700. After operating costs, $26,700. But Tom had 0 debt service. The $26,700 was pure profit, enough for living expenses plus small savings. Tom survived. Richard failed. The math was simple. The crisis years, 1983 through '89. Year by year, the crisis unfolded. Tom watched neighbors fall while he survived. 1983. Crop prices collapsed in spring. Export markets dried up. Interest rates hit 21%. Tom's income dropped to $50,700 gross. Richard's income dropped to $676,000 gross. Richard fell behind on payments. Tom's Farmall kept working. No payment to make. Just fuel and maintenance. 1984. Bank started foreclosing. Richard received foreclosure notice in March, lost farm in June, moved to town. Tom netted $28,400, enough to survive. The Farmall was 3 years into Tom's ownership, running perfectly. Cost him maybe $120 in maintenance that year. 1985. Hundreds of Iowa farms foreclosed. Farm population dropped 14%. 3 equipment dealers in county went bankrupt. Tom survived on $31,200 net income. Farmall still running, now 4 years old to Tom. 1986. Federal farm aid programs started, too late for many, including Richard. Tom netted $36,800. Farmall 5 years owned, still working. 1987. Crisis stabilized slightly. Survivors could breathe. Tom netted $41,300. Farmall 6 years owned, past 5,000 hours total use. 1988. Drought year, yields dropped. Tom netted only $24,600, barely survived. Farmall, 7 years owned, still running 1989. Markets began recovering, crop prices improved, Tom netted 44 file $200, crisis ending, Farmall, 8 years owned, proven reliable. Through it all, the $75 tractor kept working. No payment, no lender, no repossession risk, just kept running. The community impact, other farmers' stories. Tom wasn't the only farmer in his area. 15 families farmed within 5 miles. Their stories varied. Family 1, Peterson, Tom. 300 acres, no debt, old equipment, survived. Family 2, Morrison, Richard. 4,000 acres, $594 million debt, new equipment, lost everything, 84. Family 3, Williams, 800 acres, $680,000 debt, moderate equipment, lost everything, 85. Family 4, Anderson, 400 acres, $420,000 debt, newer equipment, lost everything, 86. Family 5, Martinez, 200 acres, no debt, very old equipment, survived. Family 6, Thompson, 600 acres, $520,000 debt, new equipment, lost everything, 85. Family 7, Chen, 500 acres, $180,000 debt, mixed equipment, survived barely. Family 8, Rodriguez, 350 acres, $340,000 debt, moderate equipment, lost everything, 87. Family 9, Mitchell, 700 acres, $590,000 debt, new equipment, lost everything, 84. Family 10, Henderson, 450 acres, no debt, old equipment, survived. Family 11, Walsh, 900 acres, $780,000 debt, newest equipment, lost everything, 84. Family 12, Brown, 300 acres, $220,000 debt, moderate equipment, lost everything, 88. Family 13, Davis, 550 acres, $440,000 debt, new equipment, lost everything, 86. Family 14, Lee, 250 acres, no debt, very old equipment, survived. Family 15, Jackson, 1,000 acres, $1.2 million debt, newest equipment, lost everything, 83. Final tally, 15 families. 4 survived. Tom, Martinez, Chen, Henderson, Lee. 11 failed. Survival rate, 27%. Pattern was clear. Debt killed farms. Those without debt or minimal debt survived. Those with heavy debt failed. Equipment age didn't matter. The Jacksons had the newest equipment in the county, lost everything, 83. The Lees had the oldest equipment, survived. Tom's $75 Farmall wasn't unique strategy, but it was proof of principle. Old and paid for beats new and financed during crisis. The mathematics of survival. Why exactly did Tom survive while Richard failed? The numbers tell the story. Break-even analysis. Tom, fixed costs, annual, 0 debt service. Variable costs, $24,000 operating costs. Living expenses, $22,000 total needed annually, $46,000 to generate $46,000 net. Tom needed approximately $70,000 gross, 66% margin. On 300 acres, corn, 150 acres at 120 bushels. Dunch, 18,000 bushels. Beans, 150 acres at 40 bushels. Brie, 6,000 bushels. Corn at 240, bowl, $40,200. Beans at $5. 20 was rather 31 to 200, total gross. $74,400 Tom could survive even at crisis prices. Barely, but survival was enough. Break-even analysis. Richard, fixed costs, annual, $832,000 debt service, variable costs, $280,000 operating costs, living expenses, $48,000 total needed annually, $1,160,000 to generate $1,160,000 net. Richard needed approximately $1,240,000 gross, 80% margin. On 4,000 acres at crisis prices, Corn, 2,000 acres at 120 bushels, 240,000 bushels. Beans, 2,000 acres at 40 bushels, 80,000 bushels. Corn at 240, rice $576,000. Beans at 520, $416,000. Total gross, $992,000. Richard fell short by $448,000 annually. Impossible to sustain. The difference? $832,000 annual debt service. That's what killed Richard. Tom had zero debt service. That's what saved him. Equipment age was irrelevant. The Farmall was 35 years old. Richard's tractors were 3 years old. Didn't matter. Debt mattered. The lesson spreads. How Tom influenced others. After surviving the crisis, Tom became informal advisor to younger farmers. They sought his wisdom. Young Farmer 1, Jason Walsh, age 2894. Mr. Peterson, I'm starting farming. Should I buy new equipment or used? Tom's answer, can you afford new without borrowing? No, I'd have to finance. Then buy used. Buy what you can afford cash. Debt is dangerous. I survived the 80s with a $75 tractor. You can start with used equipment and build. Jason bought used. Spent $12,000 on equipment he could afford. Started farming. Built slowly. By 2008, owned 800 acres debt-free. Tom's advice saved him from over-leveraging. Young Farmer. 2. Maria Rodriguez, age 24, 96. Mr. Peterson, everyone says you need at least 1,000 acres to make money farming. I can only afford 300. Should I even try? Tom's answer, I've farmed 300 acres my whole life, made good living, raised family, retired comfortable. Size doesn't matter. Debt matters. Farm what you can afford, own it, build from there. Maria farmed 300 acres, made it work, still farming today. 300 acres, no debt, profitable. Young Farmer 3, Thomas Chen, age 31, 98. Mr. Peterson, I can buy a good used tractor for $18,000 or finance a new one for $60,000. Which should I do? Tom showed him the Farmall. I bought this for $75. Used it 23 years. Cost me 14 cents per hour. The expensive tractor isn't always the better tractor. Buy the $18,001 cash. Skip the debt. Thomas bought the used tractor. Saved $42,000 in principal plus avoided interest. Used that money for land down payment instead. Better decision. Tom influenced at least 30 young farmers over 20 years. His consistent message, avoid debt. Buy used, own everything. Build slowly, survive first, grow later. The Farmall's final years, 20 through 23. By 2000, the Farmall was 52 years old. Tom had owned it 19 years. The tractor showed age. Paint was gone. Back to bare metal in places, rust returning, seat torn again, one tire worn nearly bald, engine burning oil, hydraulics slow. Tom's son suggested replacing it. Dad, that tractor's ancient. Let's get you something newer. Still runs, still works. Why replace it? Because it's falling apart. Falling apart and working are different things. It's falling apart cosmetically, but mechanically, still sound. Tom kept using it. 2001, 2002, 2003. The Farmall kept working. In 2004, the engine finally gave out. Cracked block, unrepairable. The Farmall had given everything it had. Tom parked it in the shed. Final hours logged, approximately 7,500. Final cost per hour, 14.4 cents, including all maintenance over 23 years. Tom had gotten 7,500 hours of work from a $75 investment. Return on investment, incalculable. The restoration, son's tribute. When Tom's son inherited the farm in 2008, he looked at the old Farmall sitting in the shed. Rusted, broken, but meaningful. Dad, can I restore this? Make it look nice again. Why? It's done working. Because it saved our farm. It deserves to be honored. Tom understood. Okay, do it right. The son spent 6 months on the restoration, sandblasted every piece of sheet metal, removed all rust, primed and painted proper harvester red, chrome-plated the exhaust stack, rebuilt the engine with modern parts, new seat, new tires, new decals, total cost $4,800. When finished, the Farmall looked better than new, gleaming red, chrome shining, perfect. Tom saw it first time and cried, "That's beautiful. Never thought I'd see it look like that." "This tractor saved us, Dad. It deserves respect." The restored Farmall became showpiece, entered in tractor shows, won ribbons, drew crowds. People asked about it. The son told the story every time. "My dad bought this for $75 in '81. Everyone laughed. Our rich neighbor said it was junk. Dad rebuilt it for $300 total, used it 23 years. That junk tractor helped us survive the farm crisis, while the neighbor with new equipment lost everything. 15 years after he bought it, we still had our farm. The neighbor didn't." The story never got old. People understood immediately. Debt kills, ownership saves. Simple wisdom, profound impact. The funeral, honoring a philosophy. When Tom died in 2018, the funeral celebrated more than a man, celebrated a philosophy. The pastor spoke. Tom Peterson lived according to simple principles: own more than you owe. Simple beats complex, patient beats rushed. These principles saved his farm when hundreds lost theirs. The symbol of Tom's philosophy was a 1948 Farmall H tractor he bought for $75. His wealthy neighbor mocked him, called it junk, said Tom would never succeed thinking small. 15 years later, Tom still had his farm. The wealthy neighbor had lost everything. The $75 tractor proved wiser than millions in debt. Tom never said "I told you so," never gloated, just quietly farmed his land, raised his family, lived his values. That quiet consistency is his legacy. We honor Tom today, not because he was rich. He wasn't. Not because he farmed thousands of acres. He didn't. We honor him because he understood something fundamental. Freedom from debt is worth more than size of operation. The Farmall sits in the shed today, restored, beautiful, a monument to patient wisdom, to owning versus owing, to surviving versus expanding. Rest well, Tom. Your $75 tractor taught us all something important. What you own matters more than what you owe. Simple wisdom, but wisdom that saved your farm and can save ours if we listen. 600 people attended, former neighbors, equipment dealers, young farmers Tom had advised, people who'd heard the story and wanted to pay respects. The Farmall was displayed outside the church, polished, perfect, a reminder of what it represented. The legacy today, how the story lives on in 2024. 43 years after Tom bought the Farmall, the story still resonates. Tom's grandson farms the land now, 300 acres, same size as Tom, no debt, using mixture of old and newer equipment. All paid for. The Farmall sits in the shed, gets started monthly, driven around the property, maintained lovingly, will never work hard again, but represents something important. Farm tours visit regularly, school groups, Aggie students, business classes. Everyone wants to see the $75 tractor that saved a farm. The grandson tells the story. 1981, my grandpa bought this tractor for $75. Neighbor laughed, said it was junk, said Grandpa thought too small. Crisis hit in '83. Neighbor's debt crushed him, lost everything. Grandpa's lack of debt saved him. This tractor kept working, no payment, no lender, just kept running. 15 years later, 1996, Grandpa still had his farm. Neighbor was working in Des Moines, having lost his. The difference? This tractor and the philosophy it represented. Own more than you owe. Simple beats complex. Patient beats rushed. Those principles saved this farm, still guide us today. We could farm more acres, could expand, could borrow. But why? We're profitable at 300. We're debt-free. We're secure. That's better than bigger and leveraged. This tractor taught my grandpa that lesson. He taught my dad. Dad taught me. Someday I'll teach my kids. The lesson lives on. The lesson does live on, not just in that family, in hundreds of farmers who heard the story and applied the principles. The final truth. What the $75 bought Tom Peterson paid $75 for a 1948 Farmall H tractor in June 1981. What did that $75 actually buy? Surface level, a broken tractor that needed 3 months of work to make functional. Deeper level, a reliable tool that worked for 23 years at 14 cents per hour. Deepest level, a philosophy that saved a farm, that preserved a family legacy, that taught generations about debt and ownership. The $75 bought wisdom. The rich neighbor's millions bought failure. Price doesn't determine value. Wisdom does. Tom understood that. The neighbor didn't. Tom survived. The neighbor failed. The Farmall proved it. 43 years later, the lesson still teaches. The tractor still runs. The story still matters. Because what you own beats what you owe. Because simple beats complex. Because laughing last beats laughing first. The rich neighbor laughed at the $75 junk tractor. 15 years later, Tom still had his farm. The neighbor didn't. That's the whole story. That's the lesson. That's why it matters. $75. Best investment in Iowa farming history. Not because of the tractor, because of the wisdom. Own your stuff. Own nothing. Survive everything. That's the Tom Peterson way. That's the $75 tractor legacy. The end. The broader context. Why Tom's story matters beyond farming. Tom Peterson's $75 tractor story transcends agriculture. The principles apply everywhere. Business, personal finance, life choices. The wisdom is universal. Principle 1. Debt amplifies everything. When times are good, debt amplifies gains. Richard's leverage let him farm 4,000 acres. Made millions during boom years. Looked like genius. When times are bad, debt amplifies losses. Same leverage crushed Richard during crisis, turned manageable problem into catastrophic failure. Tom avoided amplification. No debt meant no leverage. Gains were smaller during boom, but losses were survivable during bust. Steady beats volatile. This applies beyond farming. Business that leverages heavily grows faster but fails harder. Individual who borrows aggressively lives better but crashes worse. Debt is double-edged. Principle 2, what you own beats what you control. Richard controlled 4,000 acres. Impressive, but owned none of it. Bank owned everything. When crisis hit, Richard lost everything because he owned nothing. Tom controlled only 300 acres. Less impressive, but owned all of it. No bank, no lender. When crisis hit, Tom kept everything because he owned everything. Control is temporary. Ownership is permanent. Build ownership first. Control second. Principle 3. Simple systems survive complexity. Tom's operation was simple. One tractor, basic implements, 300 acres, easy to manage, low overhead, flexible. Richard's operation was complex, multiple tractors, extensive implements, 4,000 acres, hard to manage, high overhead, rigid. When crisis hit, simple adapted, complex collapsed. Tom cut costs easily. Richard couldn't cut enough fast enough. Simple systems have fewer failure points. Complex systems have many. In crisis, fewer failure points means higher survival rate. Principle 4, patience beats speed. Richard expanded fast, from 1,000 to 4,000 acres in 5 years, looked successful. Everyone admired his growth. Tom stayed steady, 300 acres for 40 years, looked stagnant. Many pitied his lack of growth. When crisis hit, fast growth reversed fast. Slow and steady continued steady. Patience beat speed. This pattern repeats everywhere. Businesses that grow too fast collapse during downturns. Individuals who climb too fast fall hard during setbacks. Sustainable beats rapid. Principle 5. Appearances deceive. Richard looked rich. Big house, new trucks, newest equipment. Everyone thought he was crushing it. Tom looked poor. Old house, old truck, old equipment. Everyone thought he was struggling. Reality was opposite. Richard was leveraged to the breaking point. Tom was financially secure. Appearances deceived completely. Judge by balance sheet, not appearance. Wealthy people often look poor. Poor people often look wealthy. Surface lies. Fundamentals reveal truth. The counter-argument, when debt works. Tom's story teaches debt avoidance. But is debt always wrong? No. Context matters. Richard's debt failed for specific reasons. Too much leverage, 73% debt-to-asset ratio, wrong timing, borrowed at peak, crisis followed. Fixed payments, couldn't reduce debt service when income dropped. No margin for error, needed perfect conditions to service debt. Tom's debt avoidance worked for specific reasons. Conservative temperament, risk-averse personality. Small operation, didn't need leverage to operate efficiently. Long-time horizon, willing to build. Slowly, crisis timing, happened to avoid debt before crisis hit. Debt can work when leverage is moderate, 30 to 40% debt-to-asset ratio. Timing is right, borrow during recovery, not peak. Payments are flexible, can be reduced if needed. Margin exists, can survive revenue drop and still service debt. Tom's path isn't only path, but its safest path, guaranteed survival, not guaranteed growth. Tom chose survival over growth, worked for him. Others choose differently. Some succeed with debt, many fail. Tom's way guarantees survival. Debt way risks failure for potential of faster growth. Choose based on personality, goals, and risk tolerance. But understand the trade-off. Tom did, Richard didn't. Tom survived, Richard didn't. The modern application, how to apply Tom's wisdom today. Tom's $75 tractor story happened in 1981. Can it apply in 2024? Absolutely. Principles are timeless. Modern equivalent one, starting farming. Young farmer wants to start, can buy new tractor for $180,000 financed or used tractor for $30,000 cash. Tom's advice. Buy the $30,000 tractor cash. Avoid the debt. Learn on cheaper equipment. Upgrade later if needed. Don't start with debt. Modern equivalent. 2. Expanding operation. Established farmer wants to expand. Can buy neighbor's land for $1.2 million or wait and save. Tom's advice, wait and save. Don't borrow for expansion. Growth isn't worth debt risk. Build slowly. Own everything. Stay flexible. Modern equivalent 3. Equipment decisions. Farmer needs new planter. Can buy new for $90,000 or used for $35,000. Tom's advice, buy the $35,000 used planter. Difference is $55,000. That's real money. Used equipment works fine if maintained. Save the difference. Modern equivalent 4. Lifestyle choices. Farmer making good money. Can buy new truck for $70,000 or used for $20,000. Tom's advice, buy the $20,000 truck. Save $50,000. Pride isn't worth debt. Transportation is transportation. Save the difference. Invest it. These aren't popular recommendations. Culture says borrow and buy new. Tom says save and buy used. Culture is often wrong. Tom was often right. The legacy continues. Grandson's perspective. Tom's grandson, also named Tom, farms the original 300 acres today, age 32, 4th generation. He reflects on his great-grandfather's philosophy. I grew up hearing the $75 tractor story. At first, I thought it was just family legend, old story from old times, not relevant today. Then I started farming, saw the financial pressure, saw neighbors borrowing heavily to expand, saw equipment dealers pushing financing, saw the debt trap clearly. I remembered great-grandpa Tom, his $75 tractor, his survival during the 80s, his patient approach, his debt-free life. I chose to farm like him, 300 acres, no debt, used equipment, simple operation. People think I'm thinking small, same thing they said about great-grandpa. But I'm profitable, I'm secure, I sleep well at night. No lender can take my farm, no crisis can crush me, that's worth more than size. The restored farmel sits in our shed. I show it to visitors, tell the story, watch their reactions. Some get it, some don't. Those who get it usually change how they farm, start avoiding debt, start valuing ownership over size, start thinking long-term. Those who don't get it usually fail eventually. They leverage up, expand aggressively, then crisis hits. They lose everything. Pattern repeats. Great-grandpa Tom's $75 tractor taught a lesson that saves farms every generation. Own more than you owe. Simple beats complex. Patient beats rushed. I'm living proof the lesson still works. 4th generation on same 300 acres. Debt-free. Profitable, secure, because I listened to the $75 tractor story and applied its wisdom. Someday I'll pass this farm to my kids. They'll hear the story, see the tractor, learn the lesson, and hopefully they'll apply it too. That's legacy. That's what great-grandpa Tom built with $75 and patience. The final accounting. What the $75 really cost and earned. Complete financial analysis of Tom's farmall investment. Initial investment. Purchase price, $75. Rebuild parts, $212. Total initial, $287. Ongoing costs, over 23 years. Maintenance parts, approximately $800. Fuel, 7,500 hours at 1 gallon hour at $1. 30 average, 9,750. Oil changes and fluids, approximately 308 hours. Total operating costs, 10,930. Total all-in cost, 11,217 work. Performed, hours operated, 7,500. Cost per hour, 150, including fuel and everything. Acres worked, approximately 90,000 acres over 23 years. Cost per acre, $0. 12 comparison to new tractor. New tractor, 1981. $180,000. Depreciation over 23 years, approximately $120,000. Financing cost, 14% over 10 years, approximately $87,000. Operating costs, similar, $10,930. Total cost, new tractor, $217,930. Tom's savings, $206,713 over 23 years by choosing the $75 tractor. That savings helped Tom survive the crisis. That's quantifiable value of the decision. But there's unquantifiable value too. No debt stress during crisis, no risk of repossession, complete ownership and control, peace of mind, freedom to make decisions without lender approval, ability to survive low-income years. The $75 tractor saved more than $200,000 in hard costs, but it also saved the farm through providing debt-free operation during crisis. That's priceless. Richard's new tractors cost him his farm. Tom's old tractor saved his. The math is clear. The lesson is obvious. The wisdom is timeless. Own your equipment, own your land, own your life. Let others leverage, let others expand, let others chase growth. You survive, you own, you win long term. That's the $75 tractor lesson. That's Tom Peterson's legacy. That's wisdom that works forever. The rich neighbor laughed at the $75 junk tractor. 15 years later, he'd lost his farm, and Tom still had his. Laughing last beats laughing first. Owning beats owing. Surviving beats expanding. Simple wisdom, profound impact, timeless truth. The $75 tractor proved it all. The end.